Welcome back to the Composing Made Simple podcast. On today's episode, we discuss writer's block, or when you're not feeling creative, elitism in music. I also propose a pretty big challenge that we want you, the listener, to take part in. And we also go into depth with our picks of the week. Hope you join us for this episode, and I hope you enjoy. So let's get into it.
Composing made simple. We talk about something new every show. Composing made simple. Grab a coffee, have a seat, and let's go.
So what we wanted to talk about today is when, as a composer, when you're feeling non-creative or having some sort of a roadblock or writer's block. I know recently I've actually been kind of dealing with this myself because I've had a lot of transition in my life, and I've really haven't had much time to really compose music because I'm so busy doing freelance work. So today we just wanted to share some things and some tips and tricks on what we try to do to combat when you just not feeling creative or you have a block of trying to write music. So I'll go first. So basically what's really been happening with me is it's just finding time to sit down and actually compose. I've been so busy with project work and freelancing work the past few months that music's kind of like, well, this kind of gets put on the wayside because it's not where I don't earn my money right now. It's not a thing, which I'm trying to make it that. But I had an epiphany about a week or so ago, and I said, you know what? I have to really start making time to be creative. And what I mean by that is, does that mean just writing music? Or what I've found is actually finding other ways to be creative, because when I do other things, it actually fuels my creativity for music as well, because I can bring that experience into it somehow. And what I mean by that is I've actually started doing some Twitch live streaming, which is doing video games. I've been playing Star Citizen, which is a great game. Check it out. And there's a great score to that game. And I'm actually hearing it all the time, and I start getting ideas for things that I want to try to compose. So that's my kind of initial thing. But what do you guys think, or what do you do when you deal with stuff like this?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I find that in general, the approach that I have to take when I'm not feeling like, it's flowing, right? That sort of flow state, is that I kind of just have to make myself do it and make myself finish things.
Yes.
It's perfectly all right to spend time writing a piece of music that will never go anywhere, that isn't for anything, that will not end up anywhere, even one that you don't like. But just to have that experience of, okay, that piece is done. I have gone through the steps of, it's a coherent, beginning, middle, end. It's a nice piece of music. It's not just random notes, of course, right? I think that the discipline of just sitting down and finishing something is the hardest thing sometimes, because when you're not in that flow state and you're not enjoying it and you're not excited about what you're working on, it's hard to not go do something else, because it doesn't feel good. You feel kind of like maybe I'm not very good at this, and after all, maybe I'm a fraud. Maybe I shouldn't be a composer. But the thing is that you finish the piece that you're working on, you do the thing that you're working on, and you listen to it, and sometimes you'll come back to it and you'll be like, wow, that's way better than I remember. Like, maybe it's just your current attitude. It's not even the music. It's just you. So sometimes you come back and it's really good. Sometimes, I have a million pieces sitting around on my hard drive that I go back and, wow, that really was terrible. I'm glad I didn't share that with anyone. But at the same time, it's building that skill of finishing it, because in my experience, for me, this isn't true of everyone, and it's important to note that here, is that the advice we're giving you here may be specific to us. So if what we're saying to you right now doesn't work for you, just ignore it. That's okay. But for me, the ability to finish a piece of music in a reasonable time frame, say a day or even a couple of days or 3 days, is an important skill, because then when I am in the flow state, I can maximize it, right? Like, I'm really excited about this piece. I can maximize that. Okay, I'm feeling good about this today. I'm having good ideas today, and maybe even write more than one piece during that time period. And I think that's important. The other thing I find is that when I am in that flow state, oftentimes I will take a piece 90% of the way to completion, and then I will stop on purpose and go work on something else, so that the next time I'm having writer's block, I have something to come back to that I know I'm excited about. Because then I can go back to that piece of music, and I'm like, oh, this is great. Then I only have a little bit of work left, right? There's like maybe 10% of the work left, maybe a few measures to write, or just a little bit of mastering to do on the track, or mixing to do on the track, and that kind of helps me get back into the flow state. So sometimes it's not about finishing; it's about getting, like, bringing it all the way up to the edge of almost being finished, and then just leaving it so that next time you're having a problem, you've got that to sort of go back to. It's like something you can use to get yourself excited again. But I mean, there's going to be times where, weeks will go by where you are not feeling like you are writing anything good. And at that point, it's just a slog. It's just a grind. It's like a grind in a video game.
Yeah.
You just got to sit down and do it and get it out of the way. And I promise, every time I do this, I eventually get to something that I like.
Nice.
That's great. I gotta jump in because my process is usually the complete opposite. Because I always find myself being able to come up with some kind of good idea, and then I take it about 80% of the way there, and then it usually so happens that I get blocked, and I'm like, I can't finish this. Why can't I finish this? And then there's definitely an approach that, okay, just finish it. Doesn't matter if it's good or bad, but at least you finish something. For me personally, it's really hard for me to follow that philosophy, just because everything I write, I like to publish. So for me, it's a personal satisfaction of showing, how I'm progressing from each track to each track, right? So I feel that if I'm not completely satisfied with something that I'm writing, then it basically puts me in a bad mood, and that I can't really move on. So it doesn't usually matter how long it takes me. I guess usually within 2 or 3 weeks or something like that. But when I am feeling inspired again, that's when I will finish the composition of the piece. But yeah, I mean, writer's block is totally common, and as we just demonstrated, it really is different for all of us. But in my case, it's usually pretty simple to come up with just a simple idea, but it's really taking it to the final point where it becomes more complicated. And I'm sure we've all experienced it, but like Curtis said, it could definitely be the reverse as well. So
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in here because you guys said a lot of great things and a lot of good tips. I'm a hybrid of both of you. I'm kind of like you, Chris. Like, I just want to make every piece I do, hit my meter, hit my approval rating, which I'm very over. I'm very over. Like, yeah, that sucks. Like, that's just how I am. That's just the type of person I am. But I think in a way that's great, but in a way it hurts you because, like Curtis said, when you're under a deadline, you just got to get it out. Like, you can't sit here and, because, like, think about this. If you have, you got to write 5 pieces of music by next week, you can't sit there and, you don't have 2 weeks to perfect it. So it's a skill. And I think I want to say too is, like, don't get yourself down if it's not hitting you that day. Like Curtis said, just go on your hard drive, look at the other piece that you abandoned. You might find inspiration there and complete that one, and that might turn out to be a better piece than the one that you're actually doing. So that's a really good tip, and I do that a lot. Or I'll go back to something I did 2 years ago, and I listen to it, and I go, okay, I see what I was trying to do. Hey, right there, that little piece right there, that might work really well in this piece I'm working on. Or, what I mean? So it's okay to do that. And I do that sometimes. So, I mean, and there's another thing, Chris, you said that you get kind of like moody. When I'm not creating or doing something, I get depressed. Like, it's really weird. I just feel like a bump on a log, and then I beat myself up. I really do. I think it's a creative thing. As creative people, like, I don't know if you guys experience this, but like, if you don't create, like, if you like, maybe like a first week you're fine, but then after a while, if you don't create for a while, like, you just start getting antsy and moody. And like, my wife like tells me, it's like, go pick up the guitar, go create. It's like, because you're getting moody again, because I get really down on myself, and I think that's just who I am. And I've learned over the years how to, when I feel that, okay, I got to do something. And that's why I'm saying, like, it might not be music. Try a different creative outlet, because sometimes that will fuel your music. So yeah, I mean, do you guys do anything other than music, like for creativity? I mean, I'm curious.
Oh, good question. For me personally, I find it easier sometimes when I'm having a trouble composing to go back to songwriting actually, because for songwriting I have a very traditional structure to lean on, the pop song structure, and that kind of
first chorus,
focuses
bridge.
me. And yeah, exactly. And in many ways, songwriting's very much simpler than composing a big piece. So
exactly.
Usually they'll help me get out any frustrations or anything like that, and usually turns into something that I like. So that's usually my outlet.
Cool. Curtis?
I don't have a whole lot of other creative things that I do. I find for me it's kind of I used to write every once in a while, and I found that I had a choice to either be kind of all in on doing some sort of musical thing right then, or doing that. Like there wasn't, like, it was almost like there was like a reserve of fuel that I was using, and I could use it on whatever I had to use it on, but I could only use it on one thing, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And if I went and tried to do something else, sometimes that would be really great and it would be really fun. But then, even to the point of like, I find I have to be very careful about specific video games that make me feel creative. So like simulator games, like a City Skylines or Sim City kind of style game, or like a Roller Coaster Tycoon where you're like, actually doing something creative in the game. I have to be really careful about how I do that, because if I do them too much, it's almost like I use up my creativity and I don't have any left.
Yeah.
So I have to be really like those. I mean, sometimes there's kind of like an interplay, like, some stupid thing I would do when I was in college is I would have like a Roller Coaster Tycoon park, and I would like pretend that I was given like a job to like do the music for that. Like they hire people to do music for like Disney World. Yeah, and that was kind of helpful like once in a while, but by and large, I have not found that other outlets for me are super helpful. Now, having said that, I know there are lots of other people who are completely the opposite. So when I'm giving advice to people, my advice is always, well, try it and see what happens. Because you never know. Sometimes maybe you're the kind of person where, writing or doing poetry does help you. For me, it's not, but.
Okay. I want to ask you guys another kind of question. There's like two kind of questions I want to ask you. Do you guys ever improvise? I'm thinking Chris, I'm just going to go out on a limb. I think Chris, you're probably an improviser because you play piano, and that's how you stumble on. I'm curious about Curtis because I've watched Curtis's live streams a lot, and you improvise a little bit, but you always have like something in mind that you want to do, and then you go do it. So I'm curious to hear you guys' opinion on that, or what you do.
Yeah, I mean, I improvise. I mean, that's it's interesting to me because composition in a DAW is like so different than sort of classical concert style, because it's so much more structured. There's, if you listen to my concert works, notice it's much more, I guess, orderly. There's a lot more stuff where I develop a specific idea significantly more because it's easier when it's on paper and you're looking at it to think about it as like an idea instead of sort of, I don't know, in that more improvisatory way. But in a DAW, it's just I do tons and tons of improvisation because that's how you compose in a DAW. I mean, I think that's how DAWs seem to me to be completely centered around improvisatory composition. You come up with a little idea, you improvise something, you record it in, you see how it sounds, you go to the next thing, you sort of improvise something, see how it sounds, so you just kind of trial and error it. Whereas writing down music, especially if you're using like a classical form like a sonata, it's very structured and it's much more, you're spending time copy pasting exact ideas in specific ways, or using tools to lengthen an idea or shorten it or split it into pieces, and it's just much more formal, I guess. And I think my concert music is much more, I don't want to say intelligible, but much more structured and logical than my DAW stuff, which sometimes is a little bit rambly, which I don't mind because that's kind of a style in and of its own. But it's interesting to me that I can listen to one of my pieces, and if I had amnesia, I could tell you immediately which way I had done it because the concert stuff is just much more ordered, I guess.
Okay.
Right.
It's very difficult to articulate the difference, I
No,
guess.
right, yeah. I just want to say one thing, and then Chris, you can take it.
Yeah.
I feel completely opposite of that from you, Curtis. Like, I feel the DAW hinders my creativity because I have so many things to worry about. I guess it's because my background is music and how I've created music. Like, I always say I'm a guitar player, and I always noodle on the guitar, and my best ideas come out when I'm just messing around, not even thinking. I'm just on autopilot, just playing things. And
Mm-hmm.
and I feel just because it's how I was in a band, all the band stuff, and that's how we would play and write songs. And I think that's just how I've developed my writing is by improvising, and then when I find something, then building it. So I'm trying different things of like building the song or the composition outside the DAW before I go in and record it. But I think I just need to learn how to compose in a DAW. And I watch how people do it, and it's really creative, And I feel like when I do that, like my stuff, because you fall victim to the copy and paste thing. And I think, like you said, with paper, like you can see it, and it's a different way of thinking it. So I think my mind would probably work really well with paper. Like I really do. I think like that's just the way like I should compose, but I don't know how because I've never learned how to read or write music. So I've always been by my ear or my mind and trying to get that out, which is really difficult sometimes. But anyway, I just wanted to say that real quick. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just looking up the definition of improvisation just for all of us here. And it says improvisation is creating or performing something spontaneously or making something from whatever is available. So technically, when we compose, we're improvising anyway, right? So even if we're in a DAW and we feel like, oh, this is not going anywhere, but anything we make up on the spot is considered improvisation. So we can all, take, heart in the fact that we're all being creative in some way. And for me, actually, when I truly improvise, that's when I'm making tennis videos. Because on my tennis channel, especially for all my recent videos, I make basically casual highlight videos. And so in the background, I basically watch the video from beginning to end. And then at the same time, I'm kind of improvising in Logic, just playing along to it. Because I like setting up a kind of a relaxed, comfortable kind of mood. So libraries like Piano in Blue from Cinesamples really helped me do that. So whether it's a 2-minute video or like a 20-minute video, you can really just stretch your mind to its limits. And that actually helps you to kind of realize what tendencies you tend to lean towards. So there's some chord progressions which I prefer, some chromatic formulas that I like, stuff like that. So that compared to writing in a DAW for me is interesting because in a DAW I can relate to what Todd is saying when it's hindering you. Like for sure, there's things that you're trying to follow some kind of structure. You have a basic idea you're trying to develop, but for me personally, I find that playing the piano in Logic while writing a piece is my way of improvising while doing the piece. But once I have one or two ideas, I basically stop there, start producing those sections there, and then continue to improvise from there while staying true to what the original theme was, So if you already have a basic idea to start with, then of course it's good to, develop that idea before going too far away from it. But true improvisation is that is a lot of fun, actually. It's like with what Todd said, with noodling on the guitar and all that stuff. So
Right. Yeah, just the reason I bring that up is because when you are feeling non-creative, just get out of the DAW and just pick up your instrument of choice, whatever you play, piano, guitar, saxophone, whatever, banjo, and and just noodle, and you'll be surprised that you can come up with stuff. I've actually done that one time. I wrote a melody line on the guitar, and I transferred it to the DAW, and it came out way different than I normally would write if I was on the piano, and it was a way different theme. And so I tried that one time, and I'm starting to, like I said, I picked up the guitar Midi controller for guitar, and so I'm slowly integrating because like I'm so used to using the keyboard, you know what I mean, like the Midi controller.
yeah.
So like I'm so used to it, so it's very foreign to me right now, and and like all the nuances and stuff. So it's like, well, I just want to create and get this out. So trying to learn a new thing to create music it hinders it a little bit. So it's slowly becoming a thing for me. but it's not there yet where it's like totally going to replace the keyboard for me. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I brought up and I asked you guys about the improvisation. I'm just curious if you guys did that when you are non-creative. Like, hey, I'm just gonna just
Mm-hmm.
noodle and see what comes out. And usually that's where my best ideas come from. Usually.
For sure.
So yeah.
I mean, I do find that if I sit down and have a structured idea to start with, before I come down into Logic and try to program it in general, I would say that the results of that are significantly better. Like even just coming with a melody, or maybe a melody and 3 variations of that melody, written down on paper with a pencil, and then I bring that to Logic, sit down, and then I use that idea and I build from that idea. It creates a more coherent piece generally because I'm working from that idea, so then I can make sure that everything relates back to that idea, so that everything has a nice unity. A vast majority of Starbound was written that way. I do find that brings more coherence. I find that it is usually less texturally interesting, and that's again we keep coming up on this idea of like the texture-based composition and the melodic-based composition that seems to kind of be the two schools of thought in modern commercial music. And it's really interesting to me that they seem to almost be at war in some ways, because it seems like I can get one or the other. It's like very, very difficult to get them both working in concert, because the way to get to really good texture for me is to sit down in a DAW with 1,000 million samples loaded and just find some interesting sounds.
Yeah.
But then the way to get a great, interesting, memorable melody is to sit at a piano for an hour or two writing a melody and some variations of it, and then bring that to the DAW. But by then that's all so set already that I can't find as good of texture sometimes, I feel like.
Right. I get that
Which
too
is
sometimes.
interesting to me. It's interesting the way that those seem almost like contradictory, like they're fighting each other sometimes.
It does. Yeah. I've experienced that. Well,
it's very interesting.
Well, I think it's because some of that texture stuff that you go grab a synth, or it's like those things that are like arpeggiate in the background. It might not work with the piece because it wasn't written with that in mind. But then sometimes you find one and it's just like, whoa! It totally changes the piece. You know what I mean? So I love those moments.
Right.
But I totally agree with you. Yeah, it is a weird time that we're living in because like you said, with commercial music, it's like they want either or. I mean, I think the epic thing, is it still relevant? I mean, I don't know. Like, I haven't heard as much of it. I think it's changing a little bit. The whole epic
Well, we know
thing.
trailers are booming, right? So
Yeah,
epic
well,
stuff is
that
all
makes
temporary
sense.
there.
Yeah, I mean, that music works well with trailers, definitely, because that's
Yeah.
what you want. You want that action-y and people on the edge of their seat. I think it works well for that stuff, but I don't know. I mean, I really haven't watched very many movies lately because there's just not. I mean, sad to say, but there's just not really anything that's worth watching.
I think we're kind of reaching. I don't want to say the end of the epic trailer sound. It's getting pretty tired, and I don't just mean from me. I mean, I watch things now, and I will see it's like an ad for like cereal, and I feel like I've got like Daniel James style brass like pounding in the back. I mean, it's not that bad, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with Daniel James's style or the epic style. It's very appropriate in a vast variety of commercial contexts, and he is very good at it. But everyone is being so pushed to put it in everything. I mean, I see movies that are like, intimate human dramas, and you're watching the trailer and you listen to the percussion. It's, these huge,
right.
It's like, this has to end.
Yeah.
At some point, somebody, I mean, I think we're going to be going back to a more emotional style, which will be good for me because that's sort of my, more of my style.
It's become,
so I'm hoping that we come around to that. And I would like to see more Nike ads that are scored by a string quartet instead of, vast hybrid percussion ensembles that, destroy my ears.
Right. Well, it's becoming a parody of itself. I mean, it really is. It's like, oh, there's the French horn, the 20 French horns. I mean, it's like,
right.
It's just,
and I don't think it's the composers that are doing this. I think it's the people who are choosing the music that are sort of have gone a little far. But I it'll come back. It'll come back.
Yeah.
It always swings back and forth.
It does.
Yeah.
But it'll take a new form.
We'll get,
It'll take a new form.
Yeah.
They'll borrow the elements from the epic thing. Like, I think the drum thing is going to stay. Just because that percussion is cool. I like it when it's done well. When it's done well. And it actually lifts up a piece, not just the focal point of it. And what I find like really cool and something I really want to look is I like I don't listen to a lot of his scores, but Brian Tyler, the way he scores,
Oh, he is
Mhm.
yeah,
so good.
I like how he blends it. 'Cause,
Children of Dune.
yeah,
Oh, so good.
but like he just blends. Like you can tell the dude's a rock guy, but he appreciates orchestral music like John Williams, like what we grew up with.
Mhm.
But he found a way to marry the two, to make it his own, which is amazing. But yet it's still like if you want it to feel like orchestral John Williams, you can get that. But if you want it to feel like that epic whatever, then he's got that too. And another guy I like is Tyler Bates. I think Tyler Bates is like probably the composer that I'm most like because he's a guitar player and he's a rock guy. And like I think that's why I relate to him so well is because it's like I've watched videos on YouTube like interviews and him talk and stuff. And he played with Marilyn Manson. He went on tour with Marilyn
Oh, wow.
Manson for a while. But his score to oh god, what's this movie? It's amazing. It's very ambient, and it's like The Way. A great movie. I've seen it actually, and he did the score to that. And it's very ambient, and it doesn't sound like the Tyler Bates that we all know. And he did John Wick, I think. He did The Punisher, which is pretty cool. And that's more of the kind of the modern synthy kind of thing. But like he can do a lot of stuff, and just the way I bring it up is because like I think I relate most to him, and I noticed like he plays guitar on stuff, and he plays this thing called a guitar viola. I can't think of the name, but it's like a guitar, but it's kind of like a violin, and it's electrified. And I was like, dude, that's amazing. What he does is he makes like ambient stuff out of that. So he'll create like the thing that you're talking about, Curtis, like the textures with it, and then he'll layer music on top of it. So anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, but like those two guys, they have a very unique sound, and I think they do what we're talking about. They do it very well in their own. And like you said, Daniel James, he can write other music than that. He's just known for that because I've heard him write some pieces.
Yeah.
That just like, dude, why aren't you doing more of that? Because that's amazing. And so yeah, I mean, it's just like I said, you got to find your niche. You got to find what people are willing to pay you for. Going back to our conversation about that, but
Yeah.
Anyway. So yeah, I think we nailed that pretty well. The non-creative writer's block. I mean, does anybody else have anything else to add? I mean, I think we gave a lot of good tips, and I think a lot of things for people to think about because, like you said, we're all different. But I think like between the three of us, we all have different approaches, but we all kind of have similar things that we do, but maybe somebody out there will find what we do and can implement these things into their regiment and get better. It's a thing that it's going to change through time as well because I do things different than I did when I first started. Now I'm focusing more on I'm a guitar player and I'm not ashamed of that. I was ashamed of that because it's a stigma. It's like, oh, you're just a guitar player.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Have you listened to a lot of scores by Trevor Rabin?
Now, though. I'm talking about, but you got to understand, because I've been doing this, playing guitar for so long in, like, the early, 90s, and it's like, back then, people like Tyler Bates and, all these guys, they weren't around, man. It was John Williams. It's like, so, that elitism in music, which is a good segue to the next topic we're going to talk about.
Right.
So why don't we start there? Like elitism in music. And this is the topic that I wanted to discuss on the podcast. I don't know how Curtis and Chris feel about it, but I have some really strong feelings about it because lately I've been seeing, I go on not as much as I used to, but, like VI Control, Facebook groups and all this stuff. And it's just like you get flamed for the type of music you like, and I hate it. It's like I think you're the worst musician or composer, whatever you want to call yourself, because what you're doing is actually limiting yourself. Because if you don't go out and listen to other types of music, you'll be shocked of what you can find there. There's nuggets of wisdom and gold that you can pull from these things, even if it's pop music, if it's K-pop or whatever. There's something to be learned from these songs. Why do people like them? There's a reason people listen to it because there's something there. There's like, audio candy or whatever in there that they love. So you need to latch onto that and put that into your music if you want people to like your music. But anyway, I really wanted to talk about this and see if you guys have seen this and felt this, or I know I have. I see it a lot, and people get flamed out like the whole like Hans Zimmer versus John Williams. It's like, who gives it? Who cares? They're both great at what they do. So that's just my little thing to kick it off. What do you guys think?
It's so prevalent in like all areas. I mean, it's
Yeah.
prevalent in. It's weird. It's weird that there's this weird subculture of elitism amongst a lot of, I'm making air quotes with my fingers. They're commercial musicians. And then, but then, like, do you even realize that, like, to like, then there's like this whole cadre of academic classical concert musicians who look down on all of you. Like, they don't put John Williams and Hans Zimmer in a different bucket because they both score for film. So they're both, to these people, sometimes they're both awful. And it's like, well, but, a million people, or a billion people can probably sing the theme to Star Wars just completely without any prompting. You could be like, what is the theme to Star Wars? And it's probably a billion people, literally, I'm not exaggerating, probably a billion people
You're right, man.
could just hum or whistle it. And I'm like, but no one can, and I'm not saying that makes that theme better than, Black Angels by George Crumb or something. I'm saying life is a trade-off, yes, maybe that music is a little sometimes reductive or not super original or derivative of other musicians, but it's effective and it's bringing people to orchestra concerts. It's bringing people into music. It's creating new composers who maybe later are going to write the next, On the Transmigration of Souls or whatever, right? Like that's where these people get started. So it's kind of, unless you want no one to fund super weird avant-garde music anymore, you're gonna have pop and commercial music and film music and game music and all this stuff to just get people in the door. Right. These are the people at the doors inviting people in, and I don't know why you would yell at them for that. That seems counterproductive to me. So, I mean, I'm a tonal composer. I write mostly tonal music. I don't write a lot of more modern, sort of free tonal or atonal music. And when I talk with the academic musicians, I often get a lot of sort of, I wouldn't say snobbery, but I have experienced snobbery simply because I choose to write music that exists in a key signature, right? In my life. And it's like, well, but no one listens to you also. So, I mean, but I want them to, right? Like, I want them to. Like, when I taught middle school, we listened to, the Indiana Jones score, but I also made middle schoolers listen to, Threnody for the Victims of Hiroshima, right? And tried to get them to appreciate the spectrum here. So how about we just calm down a little bit and appreciate, and this, by the way, the same goes the other direction. For commercial composers that look at like something super weird and avant-garde and say there's no value there, that's also something you should probably reconsider that position, because there's a lot of very valuable work going on in the avant-garde space that's going to filter down to you, in X number of years, and you're going to be happy that it did. Right. So I think it's just a matter of we all need to kind of calm down and not worry about comparing one another and appreciate each other for what unique contribution each one does. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
No, absolutely. And it's funny because I'm getting flashbacks to when I was around 15, 16 years old, and I was like, oh, classical music is the best because it's the most complicated and it incorporates so much musical theory and it's all that. And pop music, oh, it's so bland and it's like bubblegum music. But while I mean, it's true that it's more simple, but I mean, even then, I think deep down, I was kind of like, yeah, I mean, there's an art to this, there's a beauty to it. Even if it's focused more on the production, that's where the expertise lies. And even the catchiest hooks and stuff, those are crafted by, maybe not just one person, but a lot of people. And it takes a lot of work to go into this stuff. And and just looking back at it now, I see it pretty simply. Basically, if this stuff doesn't exist, if people don't think one style of music is better than another, then there's really no interest in general. Like, that's what spices things up. That's what we can latch onto to learn from and incorporate into our own pieces, right? Because I feel like if you don't have debates and stuff about what style of music's better, then you don't really know what people like in general, right? And if everyone just likes one style, then that's kind of boring. Then everyone will do that. But if people are like, oh, pop sucks and classical is great, or classical sucks and pop is great, then you can try to do a combination of both, and it just stretches your limits on what you can do. And for me, it's just always an opportunity to expand your repertoire, if you will.
Oh yeah, there's always something to be learned. I'm going to say this: if these people that look down on pop music, if you think it's so easy, then go out and write a pop tune and make millions of dollars. Let's see you go do it, okay? Put your money where your mouth is, because it ain't easy. And there's one thing that you said, Chris, that I want to touch on. You said that pop music, like a hook, might be written by multiple people. Well,
Yeah.
doesn't Hans Zimmer do kind of the same thing? Like, he writes the basic sketch, and then he has other people go out and program it, make sounds and all that stuff. So what's the difference? And I've seen people that, worship Hans Zimmer, like he's like the greatest thing that's ever happened to film music, and he blows John Williams away because he's took it in a new direction. Great, that's awesome. But you can't compare the two, because John Williams is a film score composer. We will be listening to John Williams for the next hundreds of, not thousands of years. The guy will always be remembered. Hans Zimmer he probably will, but do you think after he dies, like, they're going to have Hans Zimmer concerts? I know he does them right now. I don't know. I'm putting it out there. I'm kind of being biased. I'm not putting my opinion.
And I mean, there's also the question of, like, how reproducible is most of what he does. It's not terribly reproducible, especially in a concert setting.
Right.
Because it's specific synth patches, it's specific techniques. Everything that a Michael Giacchino or John Williams writes is almost immediately perfectly reproducible by an orchestra, because it's written down on paper and it can be reproduced. Again, that doesn't make it
great.
Like, it doesn't mean that it doesn't invalidate everything else. But I mean, you have to ask yourself, like, well, again, everything is a trade-off. Like, what are you trading off? In pop music, you're trading off complexity, but what you're getting is accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
And in super, I mean, like, even like, stuff that wins. Well, I mean, now we've got rap music winning the Pulitzer in music, which is awesome, by the way. But I mean, even the, like, crazy stuff, like who won before? It was like John Luther Adams for his double orchestra piece. It involves two orchestras playing antiphonally. It's kind of weird, but I mean, to say that that's not valuable either is also, like, because it's hard to listen to, right? It's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
It requires you as the audience to bring stuff to the. I mean, there's also a place for that, because, I mean, I fully expect there to be, for example, I mean, just kind of a stupid example, I expect there to be antiphonal orchestra scores in the next 10 to 20 years, just because that sound is so unique and interesting, and you could do so much interesting stuff with it. So it's just so interesting. Like, why? Like, these things don't need to be in opposition. They're not. They're not in opposition. The opposition is brought to the table by other people, by humans. Like, they're not fundamentally at odds. And it's just so interesting to me that you would choose to do that. It's so self-defeating.
Yeah.
To put them against each other. So,
do you guys think that it's kind of a younger, like, when you're
sure, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I mean, I used to, I cut my teeth as a composer on the back when Sibelius, what was it called? Sibelius Scores Online. You used to be able to take your Sibelius score and post it online for people to buy. And then there was this huge discussion forum there. And of course, people immediately got into their little tribes of, we hate all the neoclassical works on here. It's all boring and derivative. Or we hate all the atonal music. Atonal music is useless and is not music. And they would just shout and rage at each other. And it was just so counterproductive. And the best times on that site were when people would, like, take the defenses down, put the spears away, put the swords away, and, like, actually speak to one another. And you ended up with something productive, and maybe you ended up with somebody trying a style or a technique or a genre that they normally didn't, and oftentimes they brought something new to that, and it was interesting and fun. And that's the time when that site was really, and by the way, that site was like, the loss of that site is, I mean, I know it still exists as kind of this other third party thing, but the loss of that site, I think, was one of the great tragedies of avid buying Sibelius was the destruction of this beautiful place where people could interact, and composers could talk to one another, because you had people on there who could write, I mean, who were I mean, just it's sort of like VI Control now, where like Hans Zimmer can like reply to you, like
Yeah.
you random person in your basement. You might be able to talk to Hans Zimmer on that side. It was sort of like that, but
Cool.
in sort of a broader, more concert music style stuff.
Yeah. Well, because it's Sibelius and it's basically those people that would use that. So yeah, it makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So but I mean that's one of the great losses, I think. But yeah, I mean it was true back then. It's just this. I mean, we don't need to form little tribes and point our spears at the other tribe. Like it's counterproductive. It's not useful for your creativity. It's going to cause you to ossify in your creative output because you're just going to, double down on whatever style you've decided is quote unquote the best.
Right.
And it's going to cause you to skeletalize and die in a corner writing uninteresting music.
Well, here's how we're going to solve it. So I have a little idea, and then we can wrap this topic up. So anybody that feels defensive about a music, my thing to you is go write a piece like that. Take it upon yourself. If you hate something so much, like, let's just give an example here. So I hate epic music. I don't really, but I'm just making it as an example. So what my task is, I'm actually going to go write a piece in epic music. So do that. If you hate pop music or you hate, John Williams film score or Hans Zimmer or whatever, put the name in there, whatever you don't like, whatever genre. My thing to you is I want you to go write a piece, 2 minutes, whatever. See if you can do it, and then post it. Come over to the Discord channel and post it in for the track reviews, or you can email us at composingmadesimple@gmail.com. I would love to hear it. So that's my little thing to you. So if you get all uppity in arms, put your money where your mouth is, and let's see what you can do. All right, for today's last segment, we're going to discuss what we're currently listening to or enjoying, hopefully to recommend some music out there that maybe you've never heard before.
I can go first.
Okay, go ahead.
There's a YouTuber musician by the name of Jacob Collier, or I don't even know how to say his last name.
I think you're right.
Collier. But he I think most of YouTube knows of him as a music genius, but it's not really until you go into his interviews that you see like his really the depth of knowledge he really has about classical music, jazz music, like just a myriad of different styles. And I purchased his debut album In My Room, and it's basically a culmination of exactly what he talks about. He's so much harmonic variance, and it all works together so well. And if you watch his interviews on YouTube with June Lee, I believe it is, he basically talks about his process and how he thinks about music, and it all sounds really, really cool. So he specializes in kind of a cappella stuff, some R&B stuff. He really mixes in a ton of genres together. He's done lectures at Berkeley and stuff, so he's he really knows stuff.
I've heard of his name. Yeah,
that sounds really interesting. I'm gonna check that out.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Curtis, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I guess my pick for what I've been listening to recently, I guess it's not really a pick, that's for other parts, but I've been listening to a lot of, I've been playing a lot of, they just had a release of a expansion for Destiny, and that made me go back and kind of listen to the original soundtrack, and I found that the original composer Martin O'Donnell, they had finally released his large-scale 8-movement work that he had written for the original game called Music of the Spheres, and so if you just, and right now the only place you can get it is YouTube because Bungie's weird and hasn't like released it, but fans have put it together and they've actually done a really good job putting it together. You can listen to the whole 8 movement work on YouTube if you just look for Destiny Music of the Spheres. It's amazingly interesting orchestral writing that is insanely accessible, right? Because it's for a video game, so it's not out there in special atonal crazy experimental music land. It is very much in mom and dad will enjoy it, everybody would love it. Iron workers who never listen to orchestral music would probably love it. It's fantastic, and it blends orchestral music. It's all a real orchestra, but it blends in synthetic elements, some really cool synth patches, modern sort of drum kit style percussion in a lot of it, and as is Martin O'Donnell's style, back from Halo. Just really, really good stuff. I just have found that I've just been listening to it over and over again this week, so it's been a really fun thing to kind of dive into. And at 8 movements and 40-ish, or actually, how long is it? Yeah, 48 minutes long. There's quite a lot to listen to. So
Cool.
Cool.
Yes, I'll go next. So, basically, I haven't really been listening to a lot of like newer music, but I kind of rediscovered since I've been, since I got the Midi controller for guitar. I'm playing guitar again and kind of reigniting my love for guitar because I kind of lost it there for a while because I was so focused on writing music with the keyboard and trying to learn piano. All this stuff. So it's like I'm kind of rediscovering my love for guitar. I loved guitar growing up, and I would spend hours in my bedroom, just playing and writing songs, and on a little tape deck recorder. Yeah, that's how old I am. Anyway, so I'm kind of going back to listening to a lot of Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, and a lot of rock music. It goes back to the elitism that we're talking about. I went through my periods, back when I was a little bit younger, my 20s. I used to listen to Yngwie Malmsteen and all these shredders on guitar, and it's like, oh, that's so much better. But, and then a couple of years ago, I rediscovered, some classic rock, like the Rolling Stones, and, just like stuff like this that I never really listened to growing up. I listened to The Doors, which The Doors are very musical. I mean, if you listen to the Doors, now that I'm more familiar with classical music and Bach and stuff like that, you can hear Ray Manzarek on his organ doing doing stuff like that and making it into a rock jazzy context. It's crazy. I've heard like Spanish Caravan is actually a part of a piece. A classical piece. I can't think of the name of it. And I heard the classical piece, like, dude, that's exactly Spanish Caravan. He just modified it a little bit, so that's where I'm saying go back and listen to this stuff because you never know where you can find treasures of gold to go. I like that, so let me go make it my own, and you can make it in your piece. There's no shame in that. It happens all the time. So yeah, that's basically what I've been doing, and I have to put a plug in for Star Citizen because outside of the podcast and music and freelancing, I do Twitch live streams. It's twitch.com/Todd Edwards if you want to come and join me while I'm live streaming. It's fun. But the score to that game is it's so amazing because it's real. It's not samples. They actually recorded it with a live orchestra. It's so beautiful. And I've reserved my copy. I'm waiting for it whenever it gets released because it truly because I was like, for a while there, I wasn't really composing any music. I was kind of like walking away from it. When I heard that score, I was like, God, I need to get back into it. I need to compose music again because it's just so beautiful. So that's kind of my world, my picks, I guess, for the week is, just don't be ashamed of some stuff that maybe if you're a little bit older, that like things you were listening to as a teen, go back and listen to it because you'd be surprised what you could find in there and try to be critical of the music because you might find new things that you never heard before. So, yeah, those are my picks. So, anyway, yeah.
Cool.
Great choices, guys.
Very good.
And now we'll close out the show with our quick picks of the week.
My quick pick for the week is going to be Output Arcade. It is a VST loop engine. But the cool thing about it isn't just that it comes with a bunch of pre-made loops and they're adding new loops all the time. The cool part is that you're actually able to use the engine and make your own loops. So you can, you can do it anyway. You can record things out in the real world. You could even like export, some stuff you've done with samples and turn that into a loop, which is something that I've been really messing with recently. It is a subscription service, but right now they have a pretty good deal. I think it's like 6 months or some enormous amount of time free. So you can go sign up and use it for quite a while. And the cool thing about it is that if you stop paying the subscription, everything you've made with it up until that point still plays back. You just can't make new stuff with it. I'm not quite sure technically how they accomplish that, but they make that claim all over their page, so it's pretty neat. So yeah, that's my pick for the week. I guess if I was going to throw one other one in, I've been recently getting into Swam strings. They're modeled, they're not sampled. Been getting some really interesting results with that. I think those are really excellent, especially for the price. So if you're looking for some solo strings, hard to go wrong with Swam strings.
And who makes those?
Audio modeling, audio software modeling, something like that.
I think it used to be called sample modeling. I think they're called audio
sample modeling. I think that's it. Yeah, maybe it's sample modeling.
Yeah,
they're real good.
Yeah, I have their brass, but I never use it. It's so hard to make them sound good.
I guess you really
Yeah,
need
they definitely when they hit their limit, they go straight to MIDI town pretty quick. It's not like normal samples where you can kind of push it a little bit and kind of hide it behind things like these. When they go wrong, it's wow, that's software. But when they go right, it is a Collier. It's equally good when they go right. So I highly recommend at least looking at it if you are not looking. And since their software is modeled, they're not sampled.
Right.
The size of them is like 40 meg.
Right,
yeah, they're very
right.
small. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can go next. The one I wanted really to shout out was Project Sam's Swing and Swing More. It's the only libraries I have from them, but they're some of the only big band jazz libraries on the market, and I mean, for that reason alone, they stand out pretty well. But Project Sam has always been known for their excellence in cinematic sampling. So when they made this change to kind of a more uplifting, chilled kind of jazz thing, it was a pretty pleasant surprise. And believe it or not, actually all of the intro on this podcast was made with Swing and Swing More. So it comes with ukulele, it comes with whistle ensembles, it comes with drums and drum patterns, and
Target commercials forever.
this is so good, man. And I mean, the ukulele strumming you hear in there, to me, it sounds completely realistic. I literally just held the chord in one hand and just pressed 2 keys on the other hand to get the strum. And then, I don't know, technology is just so good nowadays. So,
yeah.
Along that same vein, I can shout out Sonokinetics Noir as well. So that's the other jazz library that I have. And that one's actually phrase-based. I made a review on that a while ago. But, I mean, nothing can really beat a pre-recorded performance, especially for jazz stuff. It's so improvisatory in nature, and there's so many variances in the tone that you can do. So having those little snippets of actual performances is just great, and you can definitely use that to enhance any jazz productions that you're using, or even theater or Broadway stuff. It's really useful.
Awesome. Yeah.
Awesome.
Those are cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, my pick of the week. It's kind of new for me, but Fishman triple play guitar wireless MIDI controller. So this might be a huge thing for me. This might be life changing as a composer. I'm a guitar player by nature. I've been playing since I was 14, so it's very familiar to me, and I can compose on it very easily. And I'm not a piano player, so the whole MIDI keyboard thing, kind of slows me down. So I just got this. I got the East-West Orchestra package, and also I think it's Voices or whatever. I just got it for about a week, but I definitely so far what I've used of it is pretty cool, especially being a guitar player. But I have noticed, because the East-West stuff is made specifically for the triple play, so I've been using it on other libraries like Cinesamples, Spitfire, and it kind of freaks out a little bit because it's not been programmed for a guitar. So yeah, I'm really diving into it and seeing how well it will affect me as a composer, if it's going to make it easier or harder. I think I'm going to have a hybrid approach at this point, use guitar for some stuff and then still use the piano for other things, but definitely I will be reporting more on it as I use it. But that's my pick of the week. The Fishman triple play guitar wireless MIDI controller, so if you're a guitar player, definitely check it out. And also going to say the East-West Orchestra package for guitar. They have different volumes, so definitely check that out. Thank you for joining us for episode 3 of the Composing Made Simple podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Feel free to please leave us a review if you're on iTunes below. That helps us with our ratings. Also, if you want to know more about us, head over to composingmadesimple.com, and you can find all the information where you can find me, Chris, and Curtis online. Again, thanks for joining us. We appreciate your support and look forward to talking to you again soon. Take care.